So, welcome back to Let's Get Moving podcast, people. I'm your host, Ivan Markovic, and today we introduce the man who forget a career out of strength and service to his own community here. From a childhood that is fueled by iron and the grit in Edmonton, Alberta, he also transformed a physical education degree into a life that is defined by a functional power as a career, as also as a firefighter, not to forget. But after testing his limits in many competitive areas, also powerlifting and a strongman, he also pursued the extremely niche in a world of grip sport, achieving as well horseshoe, achieving award, snapping, by the way, a world record. And this unconventional strength journey has led him to his ultimate passion, meaning a historical stone lifting. And he is now an internationally recognized proponent, establishing as well strength events in Edmonton and traveling around the globe to lift legendary stones in places like Scotland and Iceland. So he, in my opinion, he doesn't just train. I think he seeks the real world strength here that uh, kind of leave the historical mark here. So I would like to welcome it. My guest here today and also your guest here today. So Dave Nisbet. Dave, welcome to the show, man. It's a real pleasure to have you here on board.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Ivan.
So it's my pleasure, Dave. Welcome. So I would like to start with the term of full styrkur, meaning like the full strength, but also meaning like successfully lifting like over 300-pound heavy stone. So what did achieving this status mean for an individual within that ancient Icelandic or Nordic society, and how did that maybe social marker influence the culture of strength that we can see nowadays?
Yeah, so it's quite a complex question. Full styrker is what it directly translates to is full strength or fully strong. But a lot of times people take that and they kind of use it for their own pursuits or their own
Okay.
ego or their own advertisement. So what full styrker directly relates to is individual tests around Iceland that relate to specific things. So some of the most specific or the most well-known ones would be the Drittvik lifting stones, right? And so
Okay.
at Drittvik, the weights go up to 341 pounds,
Wow.
and that full lift is full styrker. And the problem is people see that at Drittvik, which is the most popular location, the full styrker stone is 341 pounds, and they think, all right, if I lift 341 pound stone, I am no full styrker. But it couldn't be further from the truth. You have to go to Iceland and do the actual feat if that's the title that you want, because the titles are specific to different regions, different tasks as well. So for instance, the Husafell stone is a very popular lifting stone, arguably the most popular lifting stone in the world. It is
Wow.
based around a sheep's pen. And you have to pick it up. It is 410 pounds, so I believe that's 186 kilogram, and walk
Yeah.
it 100 feet or 33 meters to get full Styrker status there. So
Wow.
these tasks vary depending on the location. And that's why full Styrker does not mean just one thing, it means many different things, but it's all based around Icelandic society. So to go back to the Drittvik stones, which again, if you look up the title full Styrker, these ones will be the most popular ones that will come up. They're on a beautiful beach. And that was directly relating to a fishing village. And we know that the village goes back to the mid 1500s. The exact date of the stones, we do not know. But how that worked is depending on the size of the stone that you could lift, it would be the position you had on the fishing boat, the amount of money you would get paid, the amount of fish that you would get. And so your strength was directly linked to your ability to provide for your family and your social status. And so that's why these things, it's a cultural thing. There are different types, like stone lifting is all around the world, and most cultures have some link to it, but they mean different things and we're required for different tasks all around the world. So full styrker is only in Iceland and only if you've gone there and done those specific tasks.
Okay. So beyond that, like you said, there is a Husafell and a Driftwick stones. So uh, what was the original, maybe like practical purpose of these stones, and how did this everyday necessity evolve into maybe a measurable of mythological or heroic capability? So is it just that you just said, or there is something else by that that we need to
Well,
know?
again, so again, it depends. So each of the different locations have different tasks. Okay, and so
Okay.
the because Dritvik was a fishing village, the strength
Mm-hmm.
test was directly related to the opportunity to move up in the
I
fishing
see.
community on the fishing boats. Now
Okay.
there are other ones like the Legstein stone, which is 220 kilograms. It is so 481 pounds, and you have to pick that up and walk it around another stone. And that stone has a farmer's soul trapped in it because he made a deal with the devil. And once 100 revolutions of that stone are made, then the farmer's soul is freed. And so there are many, many Fulstherker stones all around the country, and each has a different story to it because for that location, it was a different task. So at the Husafell pen, it used to be actually, I believe I said sheep earlier, but pardon me, I believe it was a goat's
Yeah.
pen. And they
Yeah.
used the slab to block the entrance to the pen so that the animals couldn't get out. And it was said to be a farmer's daughter that picked and carried it all the way around. So to just pick up the Fulstherker stone means that you lifted the Fulstherker, or it's, pardon me, to pick the Husafell stone just meant that you lifted the Husafell stone. But to get Fulstherker status at Husafell, you have to walk all the way around the pen in one lap with that stone. So again, that's
Wow.
why you can't say Fulstärker just means one thing because all
Yeah.
around the country it's many things. And in one of the locations at Latra, they actually have something called Allstärker, which I was fortunate to achieve, and that is even above Fulstärker there. So
Wow.
these are very specific tasks, and that's why it's difficult for somebody who's very nerdy and passionate about stonelifting like myself to see somebody in their own garage gym getting a lift in and, I am no Fulstärker. It's like, nope, I'm sorry, man. Just because you climbed a big hard mountain doesn't mean that you climbed Everest, right? There are
Yeah.
specific titles and tasks associated with specific acts. And so, yeah, did that answer your question, or is there more that you'd like to know about it?
Yes, of course, because it's so much embedded into the history of the people. But can you
It
also
is.
share some of the most compelling Icelandic folklore or strongman figures that you know, maybe the early pioneers of this tradition, who maybe cemented the concept of stone lifting into the culture of a Northman? How should I say?
Yeah, so when goes back, the Icelandic strongman in the 90s is when the stones started becoming more popular, but on a very, very small scale. So they did have Magnus for Magnusson, Jean-Paul Sigmundsson, and they carried
Wow.
that. I believe it was the 1992 World Strongman competitions where people kind of first started seeing these. But what's interesting, at least I find interesting, because I'm fascinated by the history of this as much as the athletic pursuit because these are what I set my goals on. But I enjoy the concept of historic stone lifting because of how fascinating the history is. And a lot of the stones that we now have today have only been discovered in the past 15 years or so, a lot of them even 10 years by it's actually three gentlemen from the United States, Ryan Stewart, Sean Urquhart, and Nick Whalen. And my brother and I do a podcast called the Stones of Strength podcast, and we've been fortunate to be friends and to interview these guys. And so the Icelandic stone lifting culture is really taking off now in a way because so many stones have been rediscovered, but it wasn't as popular before. And now there is legends and myth that go back to the Viking sagas, but the Viking arrow is, I believe, like 791 to 1066 AD, and there was reference to the Viking stone lifting in the sagas, but none of the stones that we have today were lifted by Viking. That's something that's a common misnomer that people, they like to do. I don't know if you've heard of the concept of LARPing, live action role playing.
Okay.
A lot of times people will dress up like knights and have battles. It's called LARPing. And a
Okay.
lot of times people lift a stone and now think that they're a Viking, and people get a little carried away. They're maybe taking a little too many liberties and tying them together. So we did know the Vikings did lift stones, but none of the stones lifted today were lifted by Viking. They were lifted by the descendants of Vikings for a variety of different reasons, but you can't really directly link them to the Vikings. So when it comes to the ancient cultural tie-ins, it's different versus say in Scotland. Most people are very familiar with William Wallace, right? That is there
Yeah.
was the movie Braveheart, and he's an iconic Scottish figure. Now there is a stone
One of
called the
my
Wallace
favorite. Yeah.
pudding stone. Yeah, he's awesome. I'm Scottish. I mean, who doesn't like the concept of William Wallace, right? Now
Yeah.
his before a battle, his men did camp at a site called the Ark of the Seven Stains, and there is a stone directly linked to Wallace's army, at least. We don't know if William Wallace himself lifted it, but his army was there, and you can bet they were testing each other on stones. And so there are some links like that. And then when you go to the Irish mythology, there's a lot more mixed into the Irish stones that go back, way back for them, such as giants throwing stones. And so, depending where you look in the world, the concept of stone lifting is either a practice that was just for strength, like in Sweden, if you wanted a job on certain farms, depending on which stone you lifted, that's how much money you would get paid. And then again, to refer back to Ireland, it's woven into the memory of the people. So it varies depending on where you look and which exact stones you are focusing your attention on.
Very interesting, man. So thanks for sharing that. So, but I would like also to make this analogy with in the time before that standardized weights in barbells and dumbbells that we have nowadays. So, why did the naturally awkward, maybe varying shapes of these stones become the universal benchmark for raw strength? So, what does the shape itself within that stone tell us about the strength required to lift it? I mean, within us. So, what is in us that we have to, change in a terms of like strength and conditioning, maybe?
Yeah, so it's very interesting because a lot of people, if you've never lifted a stone, I understand the concept on the surface of lifting heavy rocks sounds strange,
Yeah.
right? But what
Yeah.
people need to realize is that the barbells were invented, I believe, in the mid 1860s. And barbells were
Yeah.
designed to be lifted, but they're a relatively new invention. The concept of strength right now is the least important it's ever been. Modern life is comfortable, and that's a good thing because people can have
That's
a
true.
better, safer life. But the concept of strength was more important in the past than it is now. And it was your ability, again, as I'd mentioned, with some of the stones to provide for your family. It was social status. If you were stronger than the next guy, you could be the chieftain's bodyguard. So there had to be a way for people to test their strength outside of just fighting each other. Because if you got to fight someone, you could get killed or you could get hurt, and then you couldn't work and you couldn't provide for yourself and your family. So what did we do? We tested ourselves with strengths. Well, there wasn't barbells and standardized Olympic plates. So what did we have? We had heavy rocks and heavy logs, right? So
That's true.
the concept of strength is not new. So people would have focused on stones, and the research year over year over year is building up that cultures all over the world lifted stones. It is essentially in us. A friend of mine, David Keown, who is the gentleman that's completely rediscovered the Irish stones of strength, said it's the bones of man versus the bones of earth, and you can feel it in your DNA. And it's a powerful statement, directly linking, the human condition to the picking up of these heavy, awkward objects. And because they're so awkward, we can't lift as heavy stones as we can barbells. So people will often see, a 400-pound stone lift is an extraordinary feat of strength that almost nobody can do in the world. A 400-pound deadlift is something that could be, attained with a few months of really hard work under a good coach, right? So we have to understand that when it gets to awkward objects, it's a very different thing for barbells, which they're directly made to be as efficient and easy to lift as possible, which is why the numbers are getting astronomical with barbell lifts. So you need to understand the giant variability that comes not just from barbells to stones, but every single stone is going to be a very different challenge. A 300-pound stone in my garage is going to be different to one in Iceland and to Ireland or to anywhere else in the world.
So you make a lot of sense, and I also wanted to make this episode that is focusing on the the differentiation between a conditional lift, such as, for example, when you are searching for a maximal bench press, which is for me a specific condition, and unconditional real world strength. But just maybe in between those lines, how would you define the unconditional strength in your own terms, and why specifically stone lifting is a perfect metaphor for it?
Yeah, so the concept of unconventional strength is talked about a lot these days, and that's kind of where I like to focus my training. Like you can't see it right now, but right behind me I got a lineup of Atlas stones and anvils and natural stones and
Okay.
also a ton of barbells because I think that barbell lifting is a great fundamental. But the concept of unconventional strength are it's a very difficult thing to measure. Stones are one avenue for it. So when you think of unconventional strength, where I live here in Alberta, there's a lot of farmers. And I grew up wrestling, and you never wanted to wrestle a farmer. They weren't any bigger than you, but their hands, their grip, their core strength from manual labor all day gave them this, what you could call, like, quote unquote, an unconventional strength that is not
Yeah.
measured by barbells. It is your ability. It's a very difficult thing to explain, but most people know it when they see it, if that makes sense, right? So if you see
Hmm.
somebody pick up a large, heavy, awkward object and move it from one place to another or throw it on their shoulder, most people can sense that that's a very different thing than the guy who does a sumo deadlift and lifts it 2 inches or has a
Yeah.
huge arch and does a bench press. Now, I'm not putting anybody down who enjoys those forms of training. They're fantastic. I still do them. But the unconventional strength is the type of thing that is going to carry over. It's the real world strength, right? So as a firefighter, uh, I used to compete in powerlifting. And did that make being a fireman easier? Absolutely, it did. The strength that I gained, even in those short range of motions, helped me a huge amount. Now, when I transferred into stone lifting and I worked on, shouldering a 400-pound stone, which is a massive, massive movement, right? If you look
Yeah.
again at a squat, barbell, or pardon me, a deadlift, a bench press, the idea almost is you almost want to limit your range of motion through techniques so you can lift more weight. Whereas something like stone lifting or unconventional strength is maximizing your range of motion, right? So you are learning to, so for instance, for a 400-pound stone lift, you have to learn to pick that awkward object that's unbalanced into your lap. Now, from that lap, you have to find a way to stand it up in your lap. Now, from there, you have to stand it up and get it on your chest. When you have 400 pounds on your chest, it's like having a black bear sitting on top of you. So not only
Yeah.
do you have to be able to continue that movement with the heavy weight, but also the inability to breathe. Because now we're starting to get into the psychological side of things. Because when you can't breathe, your body says, stop what you're doing. From there, you have to learn to brace and shift that weight and hike it all the way up to your shoulder, then balance and stand slow control. So you are doing a massive amount of different movements broken down into one all at one point in time. So a heavy deadlift, for instance, maybe 6 seconds. After 6 seconds, you're going to drop it or you're going to pass out. A heavy
Yeah.
max effort stone lift or carry can be 40 seconds of full exertion, right? So you're starting to
Wow.
break into different systems in your body than just the max, fast twitch muscle fibers or even grinding anything out. You can see a guy grinding out a squat. It's incredible. But again, these are not taking 40 seconds of max effort lifting. It's much, much shorter. So again, I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but these are just it's a different type of strength.
No, definitely. So practically, when someone trains for a specific, repeatable, like you said, barbell lift, the motor
Yeah.
pattern is fixed. But when you put the variability and instability of a stone, that fundamentally changes that biomechanical challenge and force of production to build that, like you said, adaptable strength. But maybe from my perspective, so or maybe for yours, of course, it's even better. So, what kind of mental fortitude or physiological approach is required for a person to tackle that lift? Like you said, for example, a Husafel stone, an object with, yeah, like you said, that doesn't have a handle and requires full commitment, maybe compared to a highly technical power lift, for example, because you have a variety of both and experience with both.
Yeah, so there's something that comes into stone lifting. There's the concept of grit, and I'm sure you're
Yeah,
very familiar with that.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
many different types of grit, right? My parents do Ironman triathlons, and the grit
Well,
required to do a feat like that is very different than the grit to do something like the Husafell carry. But the concept still maintains the same, that you have to train your mind to deal with discomfort and massive discomfort. So I personally found that there was a couple ways to tackle the Husafell. You needed to work on the anaerobic and lactate conditioning to be able to pick a heavy object like that and walk it, right? So the the high end amount of time to actually do the Husafell for the carry is about 30 seconds. So you have to be able to
well,
carry essentially the weight of a black bear for 30 seconds. So that's one element of it, is
yeah,
the muscular conditioning and the anaerobic conditioning. The other side of it is the mentality that comes with grit. It is the ability to be unbelievably uncomfortable, to have the feedback loops in your brain saying, set this down, you can't breathe, set this down, you can't breathe. And this is a very common thing I see in new lifters. They can have all the strength in the world, and even their
yeah,
technique can be quite good. But as that heavy weight gets higher up their chest for a carry or a shoulder, their instinct is to set it down because their brain is telling them to. Because when you can't breathe, you don't think you can do anything, but you can. You have to learn to train your body to do that. So fortunately, when I've been preparing on and off, well, on for quite some time, but specifically for the Husafell, about a year out is when I really started. And so, what was quite interesting, that you might find interesting at least, is last summer I didn't do a lot of shouldering of stones. I focused on my carries. And in the process, my ability to shoulder stones went up dramatically because my body and my grit was used to it. Right. And so,
yeah.
this is where the concept of time under tension comes in, that I think is something that works very, very well. Whether you are a stone lifter, or for people, sandbag lifting is becoming very popular, which is awesome because sandbags are fantastic. They simulate the concept of natural stone lifting without having to go and find natural stones, which sometimes can be easy, sometimes can be challenging. And so if you want to improve on the lifts that go from chest to shoulder or from chest through movement, you need to spend time with weight on your chest. There's no getting around it unless you are a massive, massive man like Hafthor Bjornsson, right? The Mountain from Game of
Yeah,
Thrones, world's strongest man.
yeah.
You know, though the Husafell weighs less than him, right? The Husafell was almost twice my body weight. So these are very different things. So again, how did I prepare for it? Lots of time under tension from walking, lots of time under tension where if I was shouldering a stone, there's a stone behind me that's 325 pounds. So I would pick it up onto my chest and just hold it on my chest, breathing for 30 seconds, and then shoulder the stone. So I'm teaching my body to finish the hardest part of the lift once I'd already been crushed by the stone, and my brain was already saying, get this off you. Another way that I would do it is I would lay on the ground, and as strange as this sounds, it worked. Or I would put weights and then worked up to the point where I would roll a 309-pound stone onto my chest, and I would just lay on the ground doing breathing cycles of 45 seconds. So what I'm doing with that is I'm training my diaphragm, I'm training my intercostal muscles to be able to expand under load, and I'm training my brain to be able to breathe under all this kind of distress, and tell it it's okay. You can breathe. This sucks. You don't think you can breathe, but you can. Right? So there's many elements that come into play when you start tackling a very obscure or very strange challenge like the Husafell.
David, perfect. I really love how you break it down. And also, I would like to stick with this because for our highly engaged audience here, how can that philosophy of seeking stone lifting translate to someone's everyday fitness goals, even if they never ever touch the stone? So, what would you tell them to do?
Well, if stone lifting is something you're interested in, again, sandbags are a lot easier to find in some circumstances depending where you are.
Okay.
But there are many ways to acquire stones depending where you live. If you live anywhere near mountains, rivers, streams, if it's an agricultural area, a lot of time farmers will clear stones off their land so they can plant crops. If there are landscaping stores, you can go buy them. A lot of times people buy what are called field stones for They're for landscape in the front yard. So usually you can go buy them there. So stones are not always too difficult to find. I've even heard of guys in Brooklyn, New York, as people call it the concrete jungle, lifting stones in a public park. So
Okay.
if you want, find some. Now,
Something.
how
Yeah.
will this apply how will this apply to your general strength training? Well, it'll apply in many ways. The concept of grit, which I just discussed, but also I call stones a strength puzzle because every one of them is different. Everyone requires a different process, slight different movements, different grips, different handles on it, different balance points. And so it's quite fun to figure out that challenge. You have to think about something with stone lifting as well as when you were doing a standard deadlift, it is from 8 3/4 inches off of the ground is where the handles are. A stone is
Yeah.
flat from the ground, so you are in a different position, which means you have to train your body in a different way and you have to learn to brace really, really well, right? And not only that, but as the stone goes from the ground to your lap, to your chest, to your shoulder, or if you're going to carry it or press it overhead, you have to adapt your core and your ability to brace through a variety of different movements, right? And
Yeah.
a squat, obviously, when you hold the brace, you hold that same brace as you go through the entire movement. But the brace that you need to do with the stone is very different off the ground, off of your lap, off of your chest to the shoulder, or if you're carrying it. So you have to teach your body to be adaptable in sometimes a little bit in much different positions, let's put it that way, than you will get from any barbell or dumbbell training. And that's not putting barbell dumbbells down. I do them all the time, every session for the most part, when I'm not training outside with stones.
Okay, so from the biomechanical standpoint, the key muscle benefits here, when we want to teach them, it's like to be focusing on the core muscle development, spinal stabilization, and grip strength. This is where we should
Yeah.
put the focus on at the beginning.
So let's discuss
But
grip strength first
okay, please.
unless you want to ask your question, but we need to discuss grip strength as well because that's very important with looking at
Yes,
the bigger
yes, yes.
picture.
Please continue. So because I wanted to evolve as well. So please. So we're just wrapping up a little bit. So that's also one of the part of it that I wanted to ask you. So please elaborate.
Yeah, so grip strength is often when people say, "Oh yeah, I work my grip strength." Most people think about a closed hand grip strength, like if you're holding a barbell or you're doing a
Mm-hmm.
dead hang from above. But grip strength is everything from your elbow down. People do not think about their forearms. Most people just work on their flexors. They never focus on their extensors. They're not doing
That's true.
supination, pronation. They're not doing radial or ulnar deviation. You need to work everything from your lower arms down in all the different ranges of motion. And stone lifting is something that is grip is very important. People really worry about getting hurt when they see somebody lifting a stone, but what they don't realize is that the grip is the thing that's going to fail, not your back. If you've done any training whatsoever, your spine and your back is going to be much stronger than your wrists. It's usually when people fail a lift, it's because it slips out on them. So it's very important to train your grip if you want to get good at stones. And you'll even find that with sandbags as well. But the important thing is to train it in many, many ways. So hanging on, if you're going to do heavy shrugs or if you're going to do a dead hang for time, well, that is not going to make you a better stone lifter because you're in a closed grip, not a cupping grip. So you have to consider the many, many elements that the wrist plays and how those very specific movements are going to actually play into the concept of stone lifting. Grip is something that I hear, you see all sorts of influencers on Instagram saying, here's the best exercises to work your grip, but they don't mention anything about the actual rotation that the wrist can do. Or they don't even work on the flexors. So many people get tendonitis because everything they do is closing their hand. They're never expanding their hand. And so this
That's
is where
true.
a lot of issues come with tendonitis. And sure, that's great. You can hold a 500-pound barbell, but that doesn't mean that you can pick up even a 250-pound stone, right? So I really want people to consider these concepts as well and to really broaden their horizon on what they think grip strength really is.
Okay, so that's quite good. But for example, if you have a strength coach who wants to integrate stone or odd object lifting into their own training, modern performance programming, where should they start? So are there any essential movements, patterns, like you just said, that must be mastered before approaching to true stone lifting here.
Oh, sure. So are you looking basically for ways that people can train in a gym with barbells and then apply that strength to the concept of stone lifting?
I often applying like carry movements in my own strength training movement. So that's basically what I'm just try to incorporate with them, because I think in most of the cases I usually work with many young athletes. So this is where
Hmm.
all of the progressions should be started. And so we never like reach that end a development where I can apply something even more transferable to that. So most of the cases should be like kettlebell carries, or like you said, a sandbag carries. So with different variations, so it will be unilaterally, bilaterally, offset carries. So many different
Hmm.
kind of carries, and then we will have like anti-rotational and rotational exercise in most of the cases, and then we will do much more something that is translates much more to the specific side of the sport, maybe with turning, with plyometric, or maybe even ballistic or something like heavy sandbag throws. So in most of the cases, but I would like to hear your side of it.
Right. So, yeah, I guess what I'm just trying to ask is that if you're asking for very specific ways to train the movements of a stone lift without them, or are you looking at ways to fit something like a sandbag into your training to advance your ability to lift heavier ones?
No, just yeah, just in the concept of getting stronger. Getting stronger, but
Oh,
also in a concept of, you said it, of course, very clearly at the beginning. So when you lift heavy, so the fast twitch muscle fibers are involved. So you said very good. So the lactic acid is going to build rapidly, but this is also very good because you are training very a quick muscle fibers. So they will also gonna have some cohesive appliances to the speed as well. But how would you, for example, maybe just give me a small micro dosage of planning into your strength training routines? So how would you develop an athlete, for example, in a short term or mid term?
sure. Yeah. So
Yeah,
again, it's going to depend on their goals. If they're looking to get just generally stronger, or if they're looking to train for a specific carry, that training is going to really vary. But one of the main things that I think people lack on is the strength off the ground is going to be very, very different. So you do have to learn to train in a very bent over position. So there's something
yeah,
called a flat disc deadlift or a bear hug deadlift. Now these are two things that work really, really well for the concept of picking the stone from the ground to your lap, right? So that would be called the pick portion of the lift. So those are fantastic ones. Something like a really deep good morning is going to help as well. And I do not recommend people necessarily max those out, but because you have to consider the fact that um, stones are going to be so much lighter than your ability to lift comparably in the gym with barbells. So maybe work on the repetition side of things, right? So I can deadlift 400 pounds a heck of a lot more than I could stone lift 400 pounds.
mhm,
So working around that range and working your repetition up so that you're moving very safely and very smoothly. Now, once you get a stone to your lap, you need to really focus on that extension side of things. So if anybody's looking, one of the best movements overall, in my opinion, is the Zercher or Zerker squat. This translates
yeah,
over to stone lifting fantastic. Now, that similar movement with a stone or a sandbag is going to be a front bag squat. So if you pick up a sandbag, for instance, get it into your lap, and then do a whole bunch of reps off of your lap, it is going to be, man, it is going to be one of the
mhm,
best movements you can do for overall strength training because it requires so many muscle groups. And versus a front squat, because of the diameter of the bag, it's going to put you more into spinal flexion. And you're really going to have to fight that spinal flexion. It's going to help your bracing. So now you can do that off of a box or you can do that off of your lap. Working those kind of movements in are going to also build your power and they're going to build your grit because once again, you are having a heavy, awkward object pulled directly into your chest. It's one thing to have a barbell on your back lined perfectly over your midfoot. That's a very different thing being able to squat like that or having the sandbag in front of you pulling you down, having to stabilize and then go into spinal flexion coming out of the hole, especially if you let that bag drop in between your legs in between reps. So little tweaks like having it from a box onto your lap or slightly between your legs is going to allow you to vary the stimulus, the time under tension, and the rep schemes. So those are just a couple very, very simple ideas that you can throw into anybody's training. Many gyms have access to sandbags. And if you don't have access to sandbags, we'll get a barbell in your arms and do some zerkers. You can do similar movements like that that will help you be stronger overall. And if you choose to get into stone lifting, it's going to help you in that transition.
Okay, thank you. So I'm a very huge fan of searcher squat. So I'm also incorporating something like that into my own clients' training regimen. I like to do front rack squat, or even just like a goblet squat with kettlebell. Something that maybe can, with that shape and form, maybe you put a little bit more variety and like this balance, just to have more muscle engagement. But what
Absolutely.
is, by your opinion, the most common misconceptions or injury risk that is associated with people trying to incorporate stone lifting? And what is maybe your number of uh, pieces of the advice that you would like safely transition into this type of training? For example, for me, I never tried something like this, but what steps should I be considering? Have you ever also had, maybe like a second question, a person who having a back problems training a stone lifting with you?
So I'm going to address your second question first and then get into the first. So back
Okay.
problems. Back problems are going to, the concept of back problems is extremely broad. A
Yeah.
back problem could be something lumbar tightness because your hamstrings are too tight and you're an anterior pelvic tilt, and now you have a back problem. Well, you just have tight muscles now, or is your SI joint out because of imbalances? That's a back problem. Or do you have a slip disc? These are all very, very different types of back problems. So it depends what your risks are, and what I always say, consult the experts, because I'm not an expert in that side of thing, but I do know guys who have fixed their back problems through stone lifting. And I know that sounds very strange, and it's not going to work for everyone because there's so many different types of back problems. But getting into that position where you're all the way down to the ground, getting a stretch in, and once again, using your hips properly through a full range of motion has fixed people's back problems. And when I say people, I mean a guy by the name of Daniel Strauss, who is a world champion Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter, runs gyms. He's a huge stone lifter. I've had him on my podcast, and he will tell you sandbags and stones fixed his back, which were limiting him as a highest level BJJ fighter on the planet. Now, the questions of limitations that you would mention and things to be careful of. Well, people always think that if you're in a bent over position, you're going to hurt your back. So this will tie into the back problems. But one thing you have to understand in a stone lift, and if people are listening to this, I'm putting my hand out, and basically your back is going to be flat to the ground when you're lifting a stone. When you go to pick it up, it's not like your back folds like this. You're still keeping a flat back. You're just getting it up higher and your body's hinging. So to think you're just going to blow out your back with a stone lift is nonsense. And again, going back to the fact stones have a fail-safe put in them with your grip strength. Your grip and wrists are going to give out far before your back does. I mean, unless you do have a legitimate back problem. And if you do, fix that first, right? Depending on what the process for you is. But
Yeah.
that is one thing that people need to understand is our backs are strong. The amount of meat on our back is huge. Our backs are
Huge.
powerful, and they're
Hmm.
meant to be bent, and they're meant to be built. And our backs are weak today because everybody sits and doesn't do anything. So remember, your body is strong and meant to be used. One other thing that I would really like to mention is when people, the amount of comments I've got on my videos when I go to shoulder a stone is people think I'm going to blow my back out. If you are going to get into shouldering stones and that element, which I love, I think shouldering stones is awesome. Like it is a really great test of strength. It's a really great training tool. Is you need to lean back to do it properly, but you still keep your back straight. You need to focus on bending your knees, and you get your back angle from your knees, not from arching your back, right? So there is
Correct. Yeah.
very subtle technique cues, right? So if I were to just stand up and lean back, arching back into full spinal extension, yeah, putting a max effort lift on your chest and going into full spinal extension, not a great idea. But if I keep my back relatively straight and I bend my knees, I'm going to get the back angle I need to get that stone from my chest to my shoulder, but still have a flat back. I just have bent knees, right? So these are small little technical things that if you just watched a video not knowing what you're talking about, you go, that guy's going to just destroy his body. but that's not the case, not whatsoever.
Okay. I would like also to ask you, what is your opinion about rocking? You know, heavy
Yeah.
backpack, just, walking through, because I also, I had, some of the back issues and I started with it. So I started this summer and I gradually like adding like 500 meters, half of the kilometer, so each day, but I would do it like, for example, 3 times per week. And I immediately after like maybe 3 weeks, I felt that my posture was a bit different, and also the that pain in the lower back area just vanished. So I would like to maybe just can you and like briefly tell something about it? What is your opinion about rocking?
I think that is one of the best things that anybody can do. I do it myself. I think it's fantastic. The
Great.
neat thing about rucking is not only is it great, aerobic activity, it helps load your body so your body gets stronger. But also, when you start talking about posture, it is going to help you really focus on your posture. Because
Yep.
if you have an anterior pelvic tilt just standing, you may not notice it. But if you put a bunch of weight on your back, it's going to force you through your ruck to get into a good spinal position and good
Yeah.
stacking. You're going to want to put that weight over your hips. You're going to want to get into alignment. So it's going to teach your body to get in the position it needs to, or you're really going to feel it really quick. And in that process, of course, you're going to strengthen your body. You're going to strengthen your posture. And it's really cool to hear that that did help fix your back, because that's what strength training usually does. People
Yeah.
usually get hurt from not being strong enough. Now, whether that's right, look at what imbalances can do, right? If you are weak in one area of your body, you probably can get hurt in another area of your body. That's because of a weakness. So the stronger we make our body, the more injury prone we are. Or pardon me, injury resistant. Pardon me.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very good. It's very awesome. So I would also like to elaborate what you previously just said on the legacy of that Icelandic strongman that is still alive and very well incorporated into our modern culture. But also, how have the figures like Sigmarsson or Magnusson also kept that Nordic man legacy alive and relevant maybe for today's strength sport fans here? Can you also tell us
Well,
something
yeah,
about that?
yeah. I mean, Sigmundson was, I'm not going to pretend to know everything about him, but everybody knows his name that knows anything about strongman. He was a iconic character, and the interesting thing about Iceland is it is a very, very sparsely
Hmm.
populated island with a very small population, and they are some
Yeah,
of the strongest people in the world. So that principle alone makes people kind of raise an eyebrow, like, "Okay, what's going on in this place? Why are they that way?" Right? And it is a
exactly.
huge part of the culture there is the strongman. And yeah, I mean, names like Hafthor Bjornsson, right? Again, I
Yeah,
mentioned him, the Mountain from Game of Thrones.
yeah,
He is very popular through his strongman pursuits. Magnus from Magnuson, that was a household name when I was growing up. That's my first exposure to strongman, was watching the old World's Strongest Man with Magnus for Magnuson. He's an icon. He still runs events, right? So these guys are so ingrained in the entire concept of strength that it's something that, it's Magnus was competing in the 90s, and here we are in the 20s, midway through the 20s, and he's still involved,
still
right? So
involved.
still involved. So strength is a
Yeah.
life for them, right? It's not part of their life, it is their life, right? And I think that's really, really cool, because that's something I'm trying to do for myself, and obviously on a much smaller level, but still trying to do some of the same tasks that they have done, right? By going to Iceland and doing these.
Yes, but also it tells us a lot more what is more significant here about the concept of training, strength training that actually uh, stays through all of that years, so in that period of time. So it's just amazing to me. But in this area that we are living right now, where we are practically dominated by this hyper specialization in all area, in all sport disciplines, do you see a resurrection of interest in the holistic practical strength that embodies, like you said, by the Husserl stone? And if so, what do you think that is driving the trend right now?
Great. It's a really good question, and I
Yeah.
will do my best to answer it. The so since I started stone lifting, it's probably been about 4.5 years now that I've been doing it, which isn't very long, but I have seen it grow absolutely drastically. And I think these people they really want to associate with something, which is why I'd made a concept about the Viking LARPers earlier. But people like to grasp on to the past. There are, whether you're Scottish, Irish, from Iceland, Basque region in Spain, there's places all over the world where the culture of strength is completely integrated into their history. And people like to latch onto that. And I think it's fantastic. And these pursuits are what's really cool about them for stone lifting, for instance, is there's zero barrier to entry. We all know how
Yeah.
expensive some sports can be. It costs you $0 to go through the woods and try and
Yeah.
find a stone, right? And that's what we've done here with something called the Edmonton Stones of Strength. And we've been fortunate. It's got quite popular and a lot of attention. But what we do is we've gone into the bush in the river valley. It's actually only 2 minutes from my house here, and we found a ton of stones of all different weights. And when you're doing something like that, when we get together and train, we're in nature, we're with our friends, and we are, there's a social element and an element of just being outside, and you're rooting yourself to the earth, to the ground. Something that people don't get a lot these days in, in
Yeah.
the cities. A lot of times people are never in the bush or in the forest, and when they are, maybe they're walking on a path. They're not beating through the bush digging out stones, right? And
Yeah.
the whole pursuit of even acquiring stones can be difficult but extremely rewarding. It's like a little treasure hunt, right?
Yeah.
So everything from the history of it, the process of finding yourself, getting together with friends, being outside, there's an element of history and community and so many things that I think a lot of people are really, really looking for these days because of the way that modern society has gone. There's a basic simplicity in it. And that's really, really, really rewarding for a lot of people.
Yes. Yes. And maybe looking ahead, what do you believe is the maybe enduring message that the full circle tradition holds for the future of human performance and fitness philosophy that we can actually give to our audience and the next generation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So full styrker is it's a great pursuit. The concept of being fully strong is amazing. And I
Yeah.
think these tasks are great goals. And the fact that so many people have taken that very specific name and tried to twist it to suit themselves shows that there is a longing, though, for the concept that comes with it, the concept of history, the concept of status within your specific group, the concept of pursuit. And so I can see why it's been completely adopted in the wrong way by people who some maybe don't know better, some just they just really want the title. But there's obviously a cultural and societal longing for something that checks so many boxes. And
Yeah.
so if this is something that you're interested in, really look into it. Look into the history of it. It doesn't have to be Folkstyrker exactly with Iceland, but look into your own world and find that huge goal, something that really speaks to you, something significant, and set your sights on it and work for it. Because it's one thing to go to the gym and just kind of lift weights to be fit, but there's a difference between working out and training. Training implies a goal. And I think that people will find getting fit, getting healthy, getting strong much more rewarding and more measurable if there is that goal that they can work towards. And should you get there and achieve that goal, it's an incredible, incredible feeling. And those are the things that you will carry with you for the rest of your life. And so I would really encourage people, to find their own personal Volksstärker in order to gain the rewards that come through that concept.
So, Dave, thank you so much for all of your in-depth insights into this culture of Ostrek. And we're actually practically at the end of our conversation here, and
Okay.
sadly, but before we signed off for today, so can you tell to our listeners how they can connect with you?
Sure. My Instagram is Caveman Daveman. If you find the concept of stone lifting interesting at all, my brother and I, we put a lot of work into the Stones of Strength podcast, where we talk about stone lifting with some of the best stone lifters in the world, researchers as well, and people that are very passionate. So if it's something you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, and you want to learn more, that's a great place to do it. And that's pretty much it. I got a few videos on YouTube, but mostly Instagram is where I, share videos and share content. So you can find me there.
Awesome, David. And I really follow you briefly, but thanks for tuning in once again into the Let's Get Moving podcast. And to our dedicated listeners out there, I just want to tell them to please join Dave's platform. And if you want to expand your insights and the knowledge about this unconventional strength journey. And that will be all for our today's episode. So until the next time, please just keep moving, guys. And Dave, thanks again, man. It's a real
My
pleasure.
pleasure.
My pleasure, man. Okay. So, um,
Oh, I think I lost you.